Watch this. One tiny wrist move before you push creates killer spin most players never learn. Can you spot the paddle change? Here's the number one rule for generating real spin on your serves. You must friction the ball first. If you skip the friction and just push, you will never produce meaningful spin. I don't care how fast your arm moves. This applies to long serves too. You friction the ball first, and only then does your arm follow through with a pushing action. If you lead with the push, the rubber never grabs the ball. Watch this moment right here. See how my racket face brushes the ball before any forward force comes through. The wrist stays loose, the fingers grip lightly, and the contact is thin. Let me show you a few serves so you can see this friction-first principle in action. Now watch my racket head closely. Do you see the change? Before contact, the racket head points one direction. After contact, it has rotated. That rotation is everything. I haven't even added the wrist snap yet. This is purely the forearm opening up and letting the racket head travel through an arc. If the racket head stays frozen in the same position from backswing to follow through, there is no friction, no spin. So before we talk about snapping, just watch. The racket head must change its angle during the stroke. Let me demonstrate what no change looks like versus real change. If my backswing starts with the racket head pointing down and after contact it's still pointing down, that's no change, no spin. If I start with the racket face open and it stays open through the whole motion again, no change. The racket head must rotate during the serve. Watch, backswing here, racket head angled back. As I contact the ball, the racket head swings forward and turns over. That arc, that rotation of the racket head, is what creates the friction that produces spin. Here's what true consistency with no change looks like. If my racket faces sideways during the backswing and it's still facing sideways after contact, the racket head never moved, no spin. Now compare that to this. Watch, I open the racket head, and it travels from pointing backward to forward to toward my opponent. That's a huge change in racket head direction. That change is where all the spin lives. Let me show you. If I aim the racket head backward during the backswing, then sweep it forward and finally toward my opponent, watch the ball. See how it kicks back? Massive spin. Backward, forward, then toward the opponent, three distinct positions the racket head passes through. The bigger and faster that arc of change, the heavier the spin you produce. This is the fundamental mechanism behind every spinny serve, whether it's side spin, backspin, or a combination. Next, see the problem. During the backswing, the racket is here, and after contact, it's still in the same position. The forearm never opens up. Without that forearm extension, you're just pushing the ball. When you pull the elbow in and push without opening the forearm, you simply cannot generate enough racket head speed. Think of it like a standing long jump. You need that wind up, the counter movement, to explode forward. If you just stand stiff and hop, you won't go far. The forearm works the same way. It needs to open up, load, and then snap through. This applies to every serve type: side spin, backspin, fast serves, hook serves. They all require the forearm to open and deliver force. So when the ball is tossed, the very first thing I do is open my forearm and wrist to create the conditions for friction. Watch, I toss, my forearm extends outward, my wrist cocks back, and now I have room to accelerate the racket head through the ball. For backspin serves, same thing, open first, then snap through contact. I open my forearm and wrist first. Only then can I truly friction the ball. Now the question is, I understand I need to concentrate the force, but how do I actually do that to maximize spin? The answer is short power, an explosive burst right at contact. Then try this right now. Rotate your wrist back and forth, open it, then snap it forward toward your opponent. Do 5 repetitions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now do the same motion but drive it with your fingers instead of your wrist. Grip the handle and flick with your fingertips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Compare the two speeds. Which one is faster? Try it again. Wrist, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fingers are noticeably quicker. They operate at a completely different frequency. That's why for the same hook serve or side spin motion, finger-driven players generate far more spin. The ball is only on your rubber for a split second. In that instant, wrist rotation might give you 50% of your potential speed. But if you engage the fingers, you jump to 70. It's like pressing the accelerator harder in that one critical moment of contact. This is the crucial insight about friction. Friction is not a power action, it's an acceleration action. The key to friction is speed, not force. What you need is the rotational velocity of the racket face at the moment of contact. Now, in terms of raw force, your fingers can never overpower your wrist. But friction doesn't ask for force. It asks for how fast you can whip the racket face across the ball in that tiny window of contact. And fingers are faster than the wrist every time. So if your serve lacks spin, honestly, you might not even be using your wrist. You might be driving the whole motion from your forearm or even your upper arm. Sure, you can generate speed that way. You can make the ball feel heavy, but you will never generate real spin. Remember this. Friction means accelerate, don't muscle. For shake-hand grip, here's how the fingers work. Watch my hand. I'm using my index finger and thumb to lever the racket face, rotating it rapidly through the ball. See how the paddle spins on its own axis. The faster I rotate the racket face, the more spin the ball carries. Watch closely, that rotation speed is everything. Now if you only use your forearm, you might practice for a year and your spin barely improves. Your consistency gets better, sure, fewer missed serves. But the actual spin doesn't increase because you never added the element that multiplies rotation. So we have friction driven by the fingers, but there's one more piece. You also need braking. After the fingers snap through contact, the motion has to stop cleanly. Try this with your racket. Hold it in whatever grip you use, shake hand or pen hold. Now flick your fingers downward, snap and stop. Then flick them forward, snap and stop. Then flick upward, snap and stop. Down, forward, up. Each direction, the fingers fire and then halt. Notice how short and explosive each motion is. That's because finger power is inch power, a burst over a tiny range. The stopping point is built right into the motion itself. Next, once you use your fingers for the friction, the braking happens automatically. That's the beauty of it. Fingers have a limited range of motion. When I snap downward, the motion simply ends. When I snap forward, it ends. Upward, same thing. There's nowhere else for the fingers to go, so the racket face stops on its own. But with the forearm, the braking distance is much longer. You have to consciously decide to stop, and that delay bleeds away spin. Fingers are self-limiting. The compact arc means the acceleration is intense, and the deceleration is immediate. Watch the racket head, see how little it actually travels. That tiny window is all you need. So by using your fingers, you've already solved the braking problem. The limited range stops the motion for you. Once the fingers complete their job, accelerate, contact, brake, then you layer in the arm's contribution, directing the ball forward, upward, or downward, adding the hook or the pendulum angle. The fingers handle the spin, the arm handles the placement. When you learn to use your fingers for power, that is when real friction begins.